ahead and kick it off. My name is Carrie Ross, and I work with the alumni for the School of Business. We're thrilled you guys are here, community members from School of Business. And we are thrilled to have Ashley Parham here. She is our Director of Wellbeing for Wake Forest, and she did this amazing session on resilience at Alumni Weekend. For our alums in person, they loved it, and so we've asked her back to do this again. So Ashley, I will let you just kick it off.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Carrie. Thanks everyone for taking a little bit of time out of your day to, what I'm thinking is you're just like taking care of you for a minute. And that's so great. There are only 5,000 things in any given moment that you could be doing otherwise. So I appreciate you taking this time for you. So I'm going to share my slides. As I named already, but anyone that's joining now, if you need your camera off, no worries at all. I use what we call trauma-informed approach to all of my trainings, which means you know yourself best, and what you need today is what you need today. And so I'm going to provide what I can today. I hope you will be present and engaged to the extent that you need, and that can mean your camera's off. If you got thoughts, I'll ask you to drop them in the chat. I do hope that you'll engage in some way, because it's way better for all of us, when we are engaging together in these conversations or skill building. So I'm going to share my slides. We will start. And I was sharing with Carrie right before we started. I'm pretty good at keeping an eye on the chat if people want to drop questions or comments in there. I'm just making sure I can see you all as best as possible. When you share your screen, it looks a little bit, all of a sudden you lose your nice.
Yeah.
There we go. I like to be able to see as many folks
as I
can. There we go. Got it. Y'all see the slides? Okay. So today we're going to chat about resilience, experiencing balance in and outside of work. So I always set the tone with some ground understandings, right? Of we're going to share this space together with these things in mind. So first, like I already said, thank you for being here. Thank you so much for being here, for taking a few moments. We're at 56 minutes more that you're going to get for you today. Things are really wild right now. We don't know what is going to happen. And some things might impact us and some things might not. And so every time I give a resilience presentation, I give this context, and it is a different environment we're in. So for 5 years, I've been saying things are different and wild, and it's something different every single semester, every single year. And yet again, here we are having this conversation where things are different, right? We are at a very rapid, fast-moving, changing social, political, just our own community environment, right? We can process that. It's important for us to process that things are unexpected, that things are out of our control. And then also always emphasizing to everyone that when I talk about resilient skills, I am not saying this. Sometimes resilience can be used in this way of pull yourself up from your bootstraps, just figure it out on your own. And that's just not how I use the term. And I like to make sure I name that right away. Our resilient skills are not a replacement, right, for challenging problematic systems or structures. Resilient skills are what give us the power to endure marathon work of wanting to see change, right? Wanting to see change, which is long work. Taking care of ourselves is long work. And so these skills enable us to do that. And finally, we will talk about a lot of skills today that are individual based, right? Like mind body skills, only you can breathe for you. That's an individual skill. But when we think about resilient wake broadly, we're thinking about creating a community and a culture that is resilient, right? So I'm resilient, and then I also want my community to be resilient, and I want the culture that we're in here to be able to handle challenges and changes, right? And so it's all building upon each other, our individual skills, but also really thinking about how can resilience wake in particular impact our whole community and our skill sets and our abilities. So why am I here? Real brief overview of who I am, what I'm bringing into the space, so that you're like, why is Ashley telling me this? I don't know. She has a title over there, but what does that really mean? So I have a bachelor's and a master's in psychology. I went to Wake actually for my master's in psychology and experimental psychology. And the different areas that I've studied are behavior change, neuroscience, cycles of addiction, personality, positive psychology, post-traumatic growth, and mindfulness. I'm a trained community resiliency model guide, health and wellness coach, and a mindfulness teacher. And I work in our diversity, equity, and inclusion realms here within the Office of Wellbeing. And when I say I'm thinking about equity, I'm thinking about health equity. I just mean there are certain barriers for some people in communities to reaching health, to accessing health, right? And I'm trying to help figure out what are those barriers and how do we bring them down? That's what I mean by that. I'm also just a human being, right? I have a partner, I have friends, I have a little baby, I have dogs, I have a grandmother that I love. And so I like to just say, I'm just a human here in this space. And I also like to share, because I'll ask you to be vulnerable sometimes about what's contributing to your headspace right now, is that my direct motivation for being engaged in this work of understanding how our brains work, how we can be well, what things get in our way, is motivated by my sister, who's in the top left and right corners, or the bottom left and the top right corner. And I have permission from her to share this, because she tells everyone that she meets that the whole reason that I'm in psych is because my sister was diagnosed with epilepsy early on in her life, about 3 years old. So we grew up in the exact same environments, except the way that her brain works has caused her to have a very different presentation, very different skill set, and a lot of curiosity from me around how does that happen? Why does it happen? And why do we treat people the way that we treat them when they are different? You can fill in the blank of what different means. I see the question, yeah, in the chat, which that is a huge can of worms of question, which I really appreciate. But how do I feel the recent DEI orders will affect people's headspace? You have mixed emotions on it. My briefest answer, and we talked about this in our staff meeting earlier this week, uncertainty is the absolute worst headspace for human beings. We would rather know a bad thing is going to happen than not know. And right now, what I feel like the most recent DEI orders have done is create massive amounts of uncertainty for folks in our space, right? We're not a state school. State schools know the bad thing. They know the bad thing. We don't. And a lot of private industries maybe don't know. And that headspace is really challenging and difficult. And we'll talk about our nervous system in just a few minutes. And so I think that just like all the other times we've been experiencing these last few years, it is putting us into a heightened fight or flight state of our nervous systems. It's activating our sympathetic nervous systems in ways that we have a hard time controlling. Unless we really, really make time and an intention to do it. And so that's my first pass at that question, and I really appreciate it. Is just we don't know, and that's a hard place to be. I also really love clouds and water. Aren't these beautiful photos? Right? Look at that. That's nature right there, available to us every single day to appreciate. And part of this will come, everything that I share right now will come into play later on in the session of like why I'm talking about it, right? I am grateful every single day to be able to look at clouds, to be able to feel a breeze on my face, right? Noticing little, oops, I didn't mean to stop share. I was trying to admit that person into the room. There we go. Noticing these little things in our lives that we can have gratitude and create positive neurochemicals in our minds and bodies to experience is really important, right? There are just our natural mode of attention and processing and headspace is to protect ourselves, is to notice what's wrong, is to try to fix what's wrong, right? And so we have to on purpose make time for the things that really make us feel good, that we're grateful for, and do on purpose, right? Pay attention to what we want to and not what pulls us away, right? Because we are in these like constant conditions that are pulling our attention in like 5 different places. Like I bet every one of you is looking at least 2 screens right now, right? So that's a really easy way to be. I can just not pay attention to what I want to or mean to, right? So including moments, teeny tiny moments of gratitude and intentional positive attention makes a big difference on our nervous systems and on our well-being over time. So today our goals are going to be to learn a little bit about you all and what you're going through right now. So I'll do a Mentimeter in just a few minutes and ask you a few questions. If you haven't done Mentimeter before, it's an anonymous platform where you can answer the questions I pose, but we can see the collective answers. And so we get to kind of see differences or similarities among us, right? So we'll do that just to get a sense of what's in the room. That again helps guide the rest of the conversation. We'll take in some context, right? So what are the things that we're all grappling with as a collective right now? And then we're going to just really learn some skills. And so those are going to include things like calming your nervous system. So that's both a language to talk about that when our nervous system gets maybe pushed too far, some language to use for that when that's happening for us, and skills to bring it back in, right? To bring us back down. These skills are going to be about decompressing and support increasing your focus. These skills are going to be about avoiding burnout, right? And these skills are going to support your building of resilience and well-being. So I'm going to invite you to hop onto menti.com. You can do that on your phone, or you can do it on another tab on your screen. So menti.com. And when you get onto menti.com, it's going to ask you for a code. And it is this teeny tiny number at the top of the screen, 3355-9163. 3355-9163. And that should allow this question to pop up for you. And you should be able to answer multiple times. So the first question collectively, what brings you calm or joy? Music, sailing, yes. Getting out there in nature, right? Getting out there in nature, walking my dog. Getting in nature and connecting with a creature. Who doesn't love connecting with a creature? A good book, yes. Family, connecting with other people we care about. A lot of times when we're reading or exercising, I see that one popped up there too, we can get into that flow state, right? Where you lose track of time, your skill set is perfectly matched by your challenge, and you're not thinking about the past or the future, you're right there in the moment, right? And that is just a beautiful headspace to be in, where we get to be fully in the present moment. Walking on the greenway, dogs, worship music, just personal time in general, right? It's not about you, it's about me. Waves, yes, just hearing the sounds of the waves, right? And another exercise. So a lot of those, as I kind of tried to name as I was reading them, we see commonalities across getting into nature, connecting with other beings, often both people and creatures, yeah, and then some flow states, things where I get to lose track of time, lose sense of self a little bit, and just be fully present in the moment. So you know what these things are that bring calm, typically to your whole nervous system. Just bringing you calm and joy, it's serving your nervous system well. All right, next question. How does stress show up for you or others around you? So sometimes it's easier to think about my partner or my kid or my colleague, right? Like if I don't want to notice how I express stress. But stress can show up in our thoughts, in our feelings, or in our behaviors. So what are some of those ways you've noticed that for yourself or other people? Short responses, right? Little curt when I'm stressed out. Feeling exhausted. Yeah, system is in overdrive when we're stressed out. And it can generate fatigue for some people. Passive aggressiveness, right? I'm not going to get to the point. I'm just going to hope you figure it out. Just figure it out, please. Running late. Yeah, that's so specific. I appreciate that one. Being irritable, being flustered, low energy, not sleeping well. Tension in the shoulders. Here's a big theme we're seeing in this space, right? Irritability and shortness, right? That's the way that stress shows up for me. Some groups, it's like shutting down. I just kind of get quiet and withdraw. But the trend that we're seeing here is like I get a little bit, right? We got to get stuff done, but it might not come across the way that I usually would want it to. Distracted, short responses. There's that again, my tone, bad eating habits, not taking care of myself as much as I should. Teeth clenching and tension in the shoulders. Those are things that we'll definitely talk about. The intention here being, or of sharing these experiences together. Stress shows up in our bodies, right? A lot of times we're like holding ourselves like this and we don't even notice it, right? Where are your shoulders right now? Where's your posture right now, right? Stress shows up in our bodies. It shows up in our ability to think clearly. A lot of people get like, we've got flustered in here. People just kind of hit a wall, right? Like I always say, I know I'm stressed when I'm trying to write an email and like 15 minutes later, I'm still trying to write the same email because I just can't focus, right? I just can't settle and focus. And then it can show up in our feelings, right? I'm feeling impatient. I'm feeling withdrawn. I'm feeling sad, things like that. Next question. What are some causes of stress for you? And this is challenge by choice, right? You don't have to share every single thing that's a stressor for you. So it's what feels safe in this space to share. But what are the things that are causing you stress? Too much on my to-do list. As I glance at my whiteboard behind me, because I can't empathize with that one at all. Too much on our to-do list, right? Waiting for others. I've done my part. Where's your part? I've done my part. Waiting. Family demands. Yeah, and a lot of times family demands are out of our control. You know, my spouse's job, fully out of your control. Fully out of your control. Ineptitude. Ouch. Yeah. Yeah. Other folks, again. Unfinished projects. And that could be partially my unfinished projects. That could be somebody else's unfinished projects. Foolishness. Foolishness. I don't have time for this, right? Poor planning. Absolutely. Not enough time in the day. Lack of routine. Sick parents. When work isn't perfect. We're going to need to have a cognitive distortions conversation about that because perfection is really not a realistic expectation of ourselves or others. I see how the world might have made you think differently, but it is not. Lack of timely responses. Yeah, so a little bit more of like similar to waiting for others, right? A messy house, a bad night's sleep. Yeah. Politics. Yeah. There's a lot. Like we are going from, if anyone's familiar with the socio-ecological model, right? We're really looking at like what's happening right here internally for me, what's happening with my immediate relationships, what's happening within this little system I'm in, but believe it or not, Wake is a little system, right? And then what's happening like in society, in culture, right? Those are all things that create stress. So just a lot of validation to why in this moment we are feeling overwhelmed and stressed out. We have every single human being has personal individual stressors on them, part of their relationship, part of the way their minds work, part of their own internal and external expectations, right? And then we're in a community of folks that we can't control, that we have to continue to work within every day. And then we're in a city, we're in a state, we're in a country, we're in a world, right? And all of those things layer on us to impact our level of stress. What's your motivation to decrease your stress? Why are you here for this conversation? What is your motivation? Like really think for a moment. What are you trying to accomplish? Building resilience, building well-being, reducing stress. What's that motivation for you? So your motivation is high. Is it to feel better? Is it, yeah, to be present for my family? I want to have better health, right? This isn't sustainable. I actually don't know what I want, but I don't want this. This isn't going to keep working, right? Your own health, your work-life balance, to be a better partner, friend, employee, right? Happiness. My motivation is to feel happier. Peace of mind. Want to keep my happiness while I face new and bigger challenges, right? Model better behavior for the people that you're leading, right? And that can be in the workplace. That's also in our families. A lot of times as parents, we're the leader. That's another way that we're, another term for what we're doing is we're a leader. And that doesn't mean you have to be perfect or right all the time, but it means you're doing your best, and we can't do our best to usher others, to support others if we can't take care of ourselves. To be in control. So really important for us to discern what is in our control and what isn't, right? To enjoy life, be more present, to thrive in spite of what may come, right? And part of my asking you this is I would encourage you to make a note for yourself right now. What is the motivation for you to do the things that reduce your stress and make you feel better? Because reminding ourselves of our motivation is what can help us really stay the course in the long run, right? We can always think that like the momentary, urgent, or important need overrides this. But the only way that we can be intentional about what we're doing with ourselves is not being driven by our automatic reactions and an immediate, urgent demand or stimulus, but being able to remember and have a little bit of a little break. Wait, what am I really meaning to do? What do I really want for myself? Let me respond to what's going on around me and not react. How do I want to respond on purpose, right? And when we know what our motivation is, that can be a little bit easier to do because it's bigger than this immediate stimulus or demand upon us. Thank y'all so much for sharing this. Okay, now we're going to dig into some more of those. Well, not more. We're going to start our skill building and whatnot. Okay. So first of all, if you're here, you're resilient. Okay. There is no part of me that assumes you don't got some great tools in your toolbox already that have gotten you to this point. But what we need and what supports us changes over time. And so maybe you've been doing the same things for a while and they don't seem to be working anymore. Or maybe you need to tweak those a little bit. Or maybe you just need to try some brand new things, right? And that's what Resilient Wake is about, is really assessing that and helping us grow that toolbox or sharpen what we've already got going on. So when we talk about resilience and Resilient Wake, we're talking about adjusting, adapting, and coping well, right? With adversity, trauma, challenges, difficult situations, and in the simplest of terms, change, right? And so the examples I give for this are like a promotion is a great change, and it takes a lot of resilience. A new job is a great change, and it takes a lot of resilience, right? Because we need to pull on a different well of resources when we have change happening. So it's not always a bad thing that I need to be resilient for, is an important thing to carry with us. And another note I always make with the definition is I say well, right? And it's starred there because there are all types of ways that we can just cope that don't better prepare us for the next challenge, change, difficult situation. They just Band-Aid over, right? And so when we're being resilient, we're using skills that actually better prepare us for the next thing. They don't just get us through this thing, but we're a little bit better prepared for the next thing. Resilience is not just feeling happy all the time. It's not always having energy. It's not never feeling stress, right? And it's not learned one time and done. So we don't just get to hang out here for an hour and you got resilience on lock and you never have to think about it again, right? Because I change, we change, see previous conversation, our environment changes. What we are dealing with in a day, in a week, in a semester changes. And so we have to notice what's going on with us, to be responsive to what's going on so that we can be resilient, right? So it's ever changing with us. No easy answer. I'll just gently touch on some of these collective experiences, right, from the last few years that have really already come up a little bit, right? We've experienced a lot of collective trauma over the last few years, a really tense and unpredictable socio-political environment that no human has been left untouched by. This year, the last 5 years, right, created a lot of tension and contention in our communities. And what these two collective factors have done is impact our neurobiology, right? It's impacted our nervous system, like I said earlier. We've been in this heightened state of reactivity for a long time. And that's not good for us. Our nervous system is not built to be in high reactivity all the time. It's meant to go, oh no, there's a threat. Oh, it's okay, I can calm down. Oh no, there's a threat. It's okay, I can calm down, right? And when we stay under high levels of chronic stress, I've listed here some of the impacts of that, right? It increases our glucose, it increases our blood pressure, it increases our cortisol. This impacts the way that our organs can function, right? It impacts us in a short-term way. I can't concentrate right now. I can't make the right decisions right now. And then in long-term, over years, our health is impacted by these types of elevated components of our system that are meant to be able to regulate. And being in that high level of our nervous system isn't a normal reaction to all of these abnormal circumstances that we've been in. So we don't want to create an extra layer of distress, of shame, right? It's really normal that we've been reacting this way because we've been in abnormal circumstances. So what we want to do is say, okay, I'm going to give myself some grace that this is where I am, or I'm going to give my partner some grace that this is where they are, or my kid or my colleague, right? Because some people have been experiencing through all of that moodiness, irritability, right? Maybe even apathy, withdrawal. And that's a normal way for us to have to react to this nervous system activation for so long. What this means is it's bad for us to be in that state so long. And we've got to find ways to give that stress response a break. We must, on purpose, give that nervous system a break. It's one of the big components of resilience and well-being inside the workplace and outside the workplace, right? I have to give my body a break. And so we need to counterbalance that stressful, demanding, and rewarding environment that we're in. All that to say, we've been through a lot and more to come, right? What can we do? So I'm going to cover a few different areas here, and we're going to touch on one skill from each. There is more through Resilient Wake among each of these little domains or buckets, but in a 1-hour session, we usually get to touch on one from each. So the first thing we can do is tend to that mind-body connection, right? Tend to, how do I notice what's going on in my nervous system? What do I do to calm it down? One of the concepts we'll talk about is the okay zone for that, and we'll do some practice. Another thing we can do to manage well is focus on what is in our control. This has come up several times, right, already, from me and from you. One of the ways we can do that is have good routines, right? So when I get up in the morning, I know what I'm going to do, right? When I take my lunch break, I know what I'm going to do. When I wind down for bed, I know what I'm going to do. So as I mentioned really early on with our great question in the chat, uncertainty is the worst state of mind for a human brain and a human nervous system. When we have routines, we create certainty in our minds and bodies, right? I know what to expect. My body knows what to expect. And when we have routines that are little baby bits of self-care, right? We get that consistent, both comfortability of knowing what to expect and also tending a little bit to what our mind and body needs. So routines are a way to focus on what is in our control to help us feel better. We can manage well by decompressing regularly, right? So we are not computers, right? We cannot just expend. Even our computers have to be plugged in, right? So we must find ways to manage our energy. When I'm expending my energy, what do I then do to restore it, to renew it, to rest? So the example I always give is I love giving workshops. Like I absolutely love it. I love sharing this information with people. I love hearing from you what you need. I love it. And I am full on expending as much of myself as I possibly can for like an hour. So sometimes 3 hours, right? What I should not do is do 2 in a day. I shouldn't plan one back to back here because the second group of folks is not going to get what they need from me or what I mean to offer. And that took me some time to learn that, right? That when I expend my energy like that, I then am depleted. So what should I do afterwards? Make sure I'm going to eat, go for a little walk, do some just quiet brain work, right? Something like that. So that's just a little example of like, where does that expending happen for you? And then where do you get to renew and replenish afterwards? Different for everybody. And finally, what can we do to manage well? Prioritize kindness and intention, right? So I've already touched on this again, some gratitude practice. And gratitude practice has really had a moment here in our culture, right? People are talking about it a lot more than they used to. And the reason that it's so important is that when we regularly think about the things that are going well for us, and when we regularly notice the things that are positive and kind and helpful, we can actually impact our neural pathways, right? We can actually make it so we don't have to work so hard to notice the good things, but we actually more naturally, automatically notice those good things, right? And not just the bad things. So I'm just reminding us that all these skills are here to help you decompress and increase your focus, avoid burnout, and support your resilience and your well-being, right? So the okay zone, that's our first skill. The okay zone is, as I mentioned early on, a trauma-informed technique, right? Like how we go about talking about resilience and mind-body skills here. So what's important is to notice your signals of stress and overwhelm. You already shared a little bit in your Mentimeter already of like, how does stress show up for me, right? Having a language to talk about when stress is showing up for you is very helpful. And then when we can do those things, I notice what's happening. I can say it out loud. I can have an intentional action over an automatic reaction. So this is a visual of what we call the okay zone or the resilient zone. Okay. This can also be referred to as the window of tolerance, if anyone has heard that in physiological literature, right? So when we think about our okay zone, it doesn't mean you feel good all the time. You can have a fluctuation of emotions. We can feel sad or frustrated, bored. We can feel happy, excited, right? We have a normal fluctuation of our emotions when we're in the okay zone. What that can mean is like, I can tackle what's on my plate today. When I'm in my okay zone, I look at my to-do list and I might say, wow, that's a lot. Let's get going. I'm going to start. I'm going to get through it. Now, what's important about our okay zones, right, is that there are some days where our zone is like really narrow. It's pretty small. Like when we only slept 2 hours last night for some reason, we haven't had our coffee yet, and somebody like said the wrong thing to us right away. That's a narrow zone. I don't have much tolerance, right? Or maybe you're on vacation for like a whole week and you get to sleep as much as you want and you get to eat the foods that you want and you get to have fun conversations and see new things. And then it takes a lot to push you out of your okay zone. So most of us know what it feels like to be in that zone. We also know what it feels like to be out of that zone, right? You all shared this again. And what does stress feel like in your body? Some folks tend to experience getting out of the zone by going below the zone, by withdrawing, experiencing depression, isolation, exhaustion. Exhaustion showed up in that list earlier, and sometimes even numbness, right? Some people tend to go out of the zone by going above it. And that seemed to be a little bit more the trend in this space. Irritability, feeling edgy, right? Sometimes we experience some mania. So maybe you don't say like, I don't want to get out of bed today. You say, I'm going to work for 5 extra hours today. I'm just going to get it. I'm just going to get it all done, right? We're going like hyper over the zone. Anxiety and panic, angry outbursts, and even physical pain. So most people actually experience both of these at different times, but sometimes we tend to go out of the zone in one way or another. And this is a normal human nervous system telling you something's up. Don't just keep pushing me. Please don't just keep pushing me, right? What we want to do is find a way to get back into our zone when we're noticing those signs of stress. And that's why it's important too to think about when are the days that my zone is really narrow and why? And then days when it's really, really wide and why, right? Because we all fluctuate in that way. So now I'm just going to invite you to reflect for a moment. You can drop in the chat if you want or say out loud. How do you know when you're out of your okay zone? Now that you've seen that visual, this is a little bit of language, right? Oh, I'm in the zone. I'm not in the zone. How do you know? Anxious. So you're going up above the zone, right? You're noticing maybe elevated heart rate, racing thoughts, don't sleep well. Yep. Yes. Thank you for naming that. Your mind gut connection is so deep, so deep. Lots of chronic belly issues are related to stress. Lots and lots. Poor posture, right? So that body just sort of like giving up on you a little bit, feeling out of the zone when my body tells me and I have muscle tension. Yes. Like clenched jaw. That's what I was showing you earlier when we end up like this kind of right without even meaning to. So thank you all so much for thinking about that and sharing it. So you don't have to say this part out loud, but this is sort of bringing together some of our conversations. What are your signals? Know them for yourself. What's telling me, like some folks just dropped in the chat, how do I know I'm getting pushed out of that zone? How do I know I'm stressed? What are your stressors? Right? So we named some collective stressors, so some of those are going to include when I read or watch the news, right? Or those personal ones. It's this relationship that always causes me stress. It's this meeting. It's this recurring thought, right? So we have collective stressors, but also you have your own stressors. And it's important to be honest with ourselves about that, right? And not expect something different from something that's always a stressor or hoping it away, right? Intentional responses is what we want. What do you need when these stressors and signals show up? So you named in our Menti earlier things that bring you calm and joy, right? You know the things that nourish your nervous system, your body, and your mind. So when you're hit with the stressor, when you're hit with the signal, go ahead and think about, this is part of like resilience planning. What do I want to do? And some of those can be put into like if-then statements, right? So if X happens, then I want to do Y. If X stressor happens, if X sign happens, then I need to, right? Go ahead. When we know what we need and we say it out loud and we think about it, we can be intentional and help take care of that. So now we're going to do a little bit of mind body practice. I'm going to try to be super mindful of our time. I see it's 12:40. We are going to wrap up at 1, right? Because we all have places to be. And so we're going to go through 3 mind body practices together, and I won't spend too terribly much time on any of them. If you would like, you can close your eyes. If you don't want to, you don't have to. I just don't recommend looking at me on the screen. I recommend like a nice unfocused gaze at the table in front of you or at the floor. And we will get started. So I'm going to invite you to close those eyes. Always invitation to try every single one of these things. If something doesn't feel right to you, open your eyes, pull out of the practice. It's no worries at all. Trust your own body. So first, what we're going to do is just notice the place in our body where we most naturally feel our breath. And so for some of us, that's our chest. For some of us, it's the tip of our nose or the back of our throat. No wrong place to notice your breath. You're just finding where you notice it. You're not changing anything about it. You're just noticing, am I breathing quickly or slowly? Am I breathing deeply? Is it shallow? Now let's shift our attention to your shoulders, to your neck, to your jaw, and any muscle tension you may be carrying there. Noticing your posture. Again, you don't need to change anything right now. You're just giving yourself a quiet moment to notice what is happening. Notice what's going on as we say on the inside. You feeling anxious, calm, bored, hopeful, tired? So what are you feeling like? Now let's shift our attention to our feet and their physical contact with the floor. So for this practice, you can put your feet flat on the ground, but you don't have to. What you want to do is draw your attention fully to the contact point between your feet and the floor. So the feeling of your foot in your shoe. If you're not feet flat on the floor, just noticing your heel or your toe and how it's touching the floor. Recognizing that pull of gravity that's just holding it down right now. Noticing your body's physical contact with the chair, right? You can even push against the chair a little bit to support that. Your back is touching the chair. Your seat is touching the chair. We're just grounding ourselves. We're focusing on our body's physical contact with a safe and supportive surface around us. Usually when we do that, we notice that it's okay. I'm okay right now. Finally, I'm going to invite you to just place your hands on your belly. And I'm going to invite you to take a really deep breath through your nose. And as you do that, push your belly out. Expand your belly with your inhale. Hold that at the top of your breath if you can. And then slowly exhale through your mouth. Try to exhale even slower than you inhaled. Noticing your hands coming down with that exhale. And then try to act like you're blowing out candles. Little extra exhale there. Now you're very naturally going to want to breathe in again. So take a nice big deep breath. Noticing your hands rising with your belly as you inhale, and try to expand the belly a little bit. Using your muscles, your diaphragm, noticing those hands rising. Hold at the top for just a second if you can. And then slowly start to exhale. Real slow exhale. Noticing the hands coming back down. One more really deep cycle of breath at your own pace. Just a really deep inhale and a really slow exhale. When we do that deep breathing, we are actually activating the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest or digest system, which sends signals to our body that we're safe, that it's okay. It lowers that cortisol. It lowers that blood pressure. Now just let your hands rest in your lap. Nice, normal breathing. Just going to invite you to notice again how you're feeling now after about 3.5 to 4 minutes of practice. As you're ready, just opening those eyes if they're closed. No, it was a brief one, but if you want to just reorient a little bit to the room, that can help, just moving around a little. And I'd be curious if anyone would share how that little practice felt for them. Calming. Thanks, Lori. In person, I always do a quiet pull of the room, up, middle, down. Can't do that here. We don't got our cameras on, and that's okay. There we go. Relaxing, calm, relaxed, relaxed. Less tense, right? Shoulders lower after. So really when we notice what's going on, we can do something about it, right? And centered. So just a little bit calmer in our body, which usually allows us to be a little bit clearer in our mind, right? And we're just a little bit calmer, less tension in my jaw. That's my favorite one, shoulders and jaw tension release, because we so accidentally carry that. All the noise in your head went away for a few minutes. Oh, this is exactly what we're trying to accomplish. Just a few minutes of that, right? Can just leave us feeling like, I'm going to be a little bit better at what I do next. I'm a little bit more ready for what I do next, right? I just tended to that mind body just a little bit, instead of push, push, push. So thank y'all so much for practicing and for sharing how that felt for you. So that is sort of here is another reflection for you here that you might want to write down again. When might you use this little bit of skill in your day-to-day life? You can find guided grounding and deep breathing practices anywhere and everywhere on the internet. It helps a lot to have a person guide you. We also offer mindful weight classes here through the Office of Wellbeing. We'll be happy to send out some resources on that after this webinar that Carrie can share with folks that attended, where you can really dive into 10 mind-body skills over the course of 4 weeks and learn a lot of those types of skills that we just did and help you start practicing how to have them show up in your day-to-day life. So I encourage you to think about, where in my days can I take some deep breaths? Can I just take stock of what's going on? Right? That's just a little tiny intervention we can offer ourselves. Less stress and feel better. So some recommendations for that include setting that tone before we start anything, right? So before I have a difficult conversation, before I have a one-on-one, before I teach a class, right? Helping us just pay attention to our body's signals, resetting when we notice we've gotten overwhelmed, right? Or activated. Offering a chance for perspective taking in the moment. So in the middle of a challenging conversation, let me take some really deep breaths. And then just offering compassion and calm to other people. So when people are leaning on you, you're the person that needs to stay strong and be available right now. It's a way to keep yourself centered, because other people's energy and what they're going through impacts us. We're social creatures. So we pick up on it, our bodies pick up on it. And when we have a tool to say, oh no, I'm not the one who's in trouble right now, I need to stay calm. These are different ways that those skills can show up for you day to day, maybe in addition to, or it's kind of the thing you already wrote down. All right, next we're going to think about our routines and our energy management. So these are all evidence-based recommendations for if you're going to try to think about having a routine. These are things you should try to have in your routine, right? Your daily routine. And that includes, oh no, it is next. Next screen is true, routine. Y'all, we got to sleep, okay? Our daily routines have to include sleep. That's when we synthesize. That's when we restore. I read a whole article the other day over, if it's early in the morning and I have to decide between getting up to exercise or sleep and I can't get out of the bed, sleep. Right? Now, we don't want to do that every single day, but we need sleep, especially as our bodies gain elder age. We need sleep. We need sleep. We need to eat well. We need to nourish our bodies, right? And I encourage you, because this is so individual for everyone and whatever their conditions are in their body, to talk to a nutritionist. If you are on the Wake Forest benefits plan, you have free access to nutritionists. We can connect you through our office, or you can go through HR, and they can help figure out what you need for your own healthy eating. You need to move your body, and that can be gentle movement, stretching, walking, but routines should include movement. It should include getting outside, see previous conversation about nature benefiting everyone, having connections with other people, right? So maybe not just being on our screens at dinner time or taking that moment on the drive home to call somebody that always makes you laugh. Something to look forward to, something you like. And then connecting to your purpose or your motivation. Remember right in the beginning saying, why do I want to feel better? Remembering to connect to that regularly should be part of your routine. Also want to emphasize our wellbeing coaching program here at Office of Wellbeing, which is free to all of our faculty and staff. Another great place to tap into to help you think about what's the routine I need right now in a realistic and actionable way with an accountability partner. So we got ways to support you in this. This other idea I shared was energy management. And again, I have already planted the seeds of this in our conversation throughout this hour. So I need you to think about, where do you expend energy and how do you renew energy, right? We cannot just continue to expend all day long and think that only sleep is gonna support us. It can't. So things that can help are disengaging from all the things. When do I put my technology away? When do I just be in the present moment? When do I not be looking at work emails, right? Or notifications? How do I just disengage sometimes? What are those self-preservation practices that you need? So those are like our mind-body skills. Those are therapy. Those are doctor's appointments. Those are practices that take care of your physical, literal health and well-being. And then processing time. So when we are impacted by our own personal stressors or collective stressors, right, it creates that uncertainty, it creates that activation. And if we don't process that a little bit, whether that's writing, talking, journaling, right, making music, painting, whatever it is that helps you manifest out your activity, your reactivity inside you. Those are ways that we renew our energy, that we process what's going on in us, right? And that looks different for everybody. But how do you process when things impact you? That's a way that we manage our energy. Some specific notes, right? Limit and be intentional with your consumption of the news and social media, because that impacts our energy. And use technology to connect with other people, not to just mindlessly distract yourself. Technology is a beautiful tool when we use it on purpose, right? So those are a couple other skills to think about. What routine do you need and how can you manage your energy? A moment to reflect. What do you do to manage that, to renew that energy that's not just sleeping? Carrie and I were talking right before everyone logged on about our movement routines, right? And one of the things I always say for me, for my movement routines, are they necessary? Because I have chronic back issues. And sometimes they are inconvenient. You know, sometimes I can't go to a lunch meeting because I have to go to my training session. And so sometimes the things that renew us are inconvenient. And you still need to do them, right? that they shouldn't be the first thing that gets like knocked off the list. And hopefully I'll get back to that later and make up for it later. So reflecting on what are those things that you do to renew your energy? How can you protect them? Make sure you get them. So our final skill to talk about together is this idea that, again, I've already really referenced is gratitude and intentional kindness. So I'm going to, again, be mindful of our time, just a couple more minutes. So I won't deep dive into this concept of the negativity bias, but I assume some folks in the room have heard that before, right? It's the way our minds are built for survival, for protection. And that means we notice things that are wrong or a potential threat more often than we notice things that are good. We remember things that went wrong more often than we remember things that went well. And that is the best, wellest intentioned mind that we have. It is really meant to help us out. But in our modern day society, it sometimes really backfires, right? And so a moment of reflection, right, for you to carry with you sometimes. What's going well right now? What's really going well for me right now? And that can be today. Sometimes we just need to think about today. Sometimes it's like, what have I done this month? It's only January, but what about this year? What about this semester? Right? So different points of context there for you, but remembering to think about what is going well and let yourself feel gratitude for it. How can you make space for that full experience? So we tend to notice what's wrong, what's going bad. How can I make myself stop and pause and notice the full spectrum of what's happening for me right now? Everything is not bad or wrong. How do I make space to notice those things that are good? And when we think about intentional kindness, what I mean to emphasize to you is that the way that you speak to yourself really matters, right? And so when we have these internal thoughts, like that comment earlier, I remember of like, when things aren't perfect, would you say that to your 5-year-old self? Would you tell your 5-year-old self, you didn't do that perfectly and therefore, right? No, you're still that person, by the way. You're still that same human. Would you say that to your best friend? Would you say that to people you care about? You are just as important and valid in the way that you speak to yourself as you would those other folks that you really care about. And so be kind when you have hard moments, when the whole week is hard. Try to find a way to offer some compassion to yourself. That doesn't mean we release accountability. That doesn't mean that we don't get things done or hold ourselves to an expectation or a standard, right? We can do both of those things. We can do hard things, right? We can both be compassionate and accountable. We don't have to layer on shame or guilt, right? And nourish yourself when you need it. So when things are hard, if they're harder than usual, we might need a little bit extra care, a little bit more extra care than usual, right? So really finding ways to be grateful and being thoughtful and intentional about the way we talk to ourselves. So some of those reflections you can carry on those are, what is something that's going well for you? What are positive words that someone else would use to describe you? Right? What would somebody else, what would your bestie say? What would your colleagues say? How do they talk about you positively? So those last thoughts, really getting here to wrap up on time. We are trying to create action and intentional responses over reactions and automatic responses. We are trying to know our motivation for decreasing stress and feeling better. Remind yourself of that motivation. Give yourself space to refuel after you expend energy. Give yourself and others grace. Create a resilience plan so you can be prepared for the unknown. And so these skills and reflection questions built throughout are what can create a resilience plan for you. Happy to share the slides. Happy to put a little Google Doc together that has those listed for people to engage with. I really appreciate your time. We've got this. We're going to get through it. And I'm happy to follow up with any questions anybody has after the session. So thank you so much.